Today we're going to look at simplifying complex fractions. So you might ask, well, what is a complex fraction? What would that be? And I'd say simply a fraction with fractions in it. Like, for instance, if I had 3/4 divided by 1/2, that's a complex fraction. If I have 1 over x divided by 2 over x plus 1, that's a complex fraction. Now, there's a couple ways we can do these. One way, of course, would just be to use the elementary rules for fractions. And if I take 3/4 and divide it by 1/2, basically I'm asking how many halves are in 3/4. And remember, when you do that, dividing by a fraction is the same thing as multiplying by the inverse of the fraction. So I'd end up with 3/2 or 1/2. So there's 1 1/2 halves in 3/4. Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? And I could do the same thing here. I could just write it out, and I'd have divided by 2 over x, or times x plus 1 over 2, and I end up with then x plus 1 over 2x. Now, there is another way to do that. This is a fine way. But there is one other way to do these problems, and that is simply take both numerator and denominator and divide them or multiply them by the common denominator. Okay, like I look at here, my denominators are 4 and 2. So that means that my common denominator is 4. So I'll simply multiply 3/4 times 4, and I'll multiply 1/2 times 4, simplify, and I end up with 3. I'll end up with my answer right away, 3/2. Pretty slick way to do it, isn't it? Same thing here. I look at my denominators. My denominators are x and x plus 1. Well, they don't have anything in common, so my common denominator is x times x plus 1. So I multiply times x plus 1 in the numerator, and multiply times x plus 1 in the denominator. Here the x cancels, and I end up with x plus 1. And here the x plus 1 cancels, and I end up with 2x, which is what we've got before. That's just a slightly simpler method, slightly simpler way of doing it. Let's work some more problems, and I'll show you how this is even more. If we work this the elementary way, where we'd have to get a single fraction on top and a single fraction on the bottom, which we could do, we soon see that our common denominator is x squared. That's our common denominator. So then I'd need x squared over x squared, and I'd need x, whoops, I just made a mistake there, over x times x, and then here I already have my x squared. And down here I'd have the same thing, so 2x squared over x squared to get my common denominator of x squared, 4 over x times x over x, and then I don't need to do anything here. So I end up with x squared plus 3x plus 1 over x squared, and down here I end up with 2x squared plus 4x plus 2 over x squared. And that's the big divider right there. So then basically, I'd flip this one over and multiply it, which would make the x squareds cancel out. And I end up with x squared plus 3x plus 1 over 2x squared plus 4x plus 2. Okay, now let's keep that right there. And let's go back and work this problem. The clearing the fractions method, and let's see if we get the same thing. I'll rewrite the problem. Okay, now I see that my common denominator is, of course, x squared. So I'll multiply the numerator by x squared, and I'll multiply the denominator by x squared. Now I have to distribute. So I'm going to have x squared times 1 plus 3 over x times x squared plus 1 over x squared times x squared. And all of that is over 2 times x squared plus 4 over x times x squared plus 2 over x squared times x squared. Now notice, these cancel. This cancels and I end up with an x. This cancels and I end up with an x. And these cancel. And here we go, 1x squared plus 3x plus 1. There it is. 2x squared plus 4x plus 2. There it is. Same answer. We just didn't have to work on getting our single fractions. We could just multiply out by the common denominator, top and bottom, and all my denominators cancel out. That frees all the denominators up. Let's do one more. So suppose we have this situation, 1 over a plus 1 over b all over 1 over a minus 1 over b. Obviously, our common denominator is ab. So I'll multiply ab. Now let's try to do some of this in our head so it's a little easier. So when I distribute this, the a is going to cancel, I end up with b. When I distribute this, the b is going to cancel, and I end up with a. When I distribute the ab into here, the a's are going to cancel, I end up with b. Distribute this in here, the b's are going to cancel, and I end up with that, and there's my answer. Now, there's more of these algebra tutorials on Mr. Block's math class on YouTube. Go to YouTube and under Mr. Block's math class, and you can find more tutorials. And if you're a student and you're wanting to get a really good grade in math and do well and feel pretty good about it, but you're not quite up there, write me at Math Music Farm, no spaces, those are all put together, Math Music Farm at gmail.com, and we can arrange for some tutoring. Thank you, and we'll see you sometime.